Hello and welcome back to a new tutorial. In this video we will see how to make a cute character. This video will be a step-by-step tutorial. We will be creating this little raccoon. To help you create this character, I have uploaded the reference image. You can download it directly on my GUMROAD. The link will be in the description box. And with it I also made a cheat sheet that sums up all of the shortcuts I used during this video. But don't worry, throughout all of the video you will still have the shortcuts I use on the right corner of the screen. So let's get started. First we're going to add our reference, and when you are a beginner I highly recommend to use a reference when you can, either it's for character or object. It's going to help you focus on getting the hang on Blender and creating your character or your object simpler than if you would do it without any reference. To add a reference, we pressed Shift A to open the add menu, and we're going to choose image reference. You can also just drag and drop your image on Blender if you want. So now you just have to select your image and click on load reference image. Now that we have our image on the 3D viewport, we're going into the data properties and we're going to click on opacity and set it to something like 0.1. Then I click on the image and I move it by pressing G, then X, so it's moving on the X axis. And I'm going to try to center the front of the character. Take the blue line as a reference. Then I move it a bit on the back by pressing G, then Y. Now, while still selecting the image, I press Shift G to duplicate it, and right after I press G, Y to move it on the Y axis. Now we are going to rotate it so we can use the side reference. I'm pressing R90 and again GX to move it to the left on the x-axis. Now if you press 3 on your numpad, you can go into the side view and we can move it on the y-axis. And now we have both the front and the side view ready. A tip for when you are a beginner is to take the habit to rename your collection and your objects. That's what I do here. I take time to rename the first collection and I'm gonna name it settings. Here I will put all of the things like image reference, the light setting, cameras, and I add another collection by right clicking and I'm naming it character. Now we can start the modeling parts. I'm pressing Shift A to show the add menu, then I go into mesh and click on cube. I'm sizing it down a bit and I move it a bit on the Z axis so we keep it centered. Now I'm going into the modifier tab on the right and we're going to add a subdivision modifier and set it on 2. Now we can apply the modifier. I'm adding another modifier, but this time it's the mirror modifier. Back to our shape, we click on it and then we press tab to enter the edit mode. And we're going to select all of the vertices on the left side and press X to delete them by choosing delete vertices. On our mirror modifier, don't forget to check clipping. It will prevent the middle vertices from moving to the left side. Back to edit mode by pressing tab, we're going to move the vertices in order to match our reference. To help us, we're going to enable the proportional editing tool. With it, when we will move one or multiple vertices, it will also affect the vertices around, depending on the size of the circle that you see just here, that you can size up or size down with your mouse wheel. So I grab some vertices on the right side and then I move them to match the reference. I do the same on the top and the bottom of the shape. I also rotate a little bit some vertices to avoid any weird edges. Now we can go on the side by pressing 3 on our numpad, and first I click on my shape and I size it up on the y-axis. So I press S and then Y. Then the same way we did earlier, we're going to align the vertices with our reference. Back in the front view, let's add a loop in the middle, and once I left click on my mouse to add the loop, before letting it go, I slide it on the left, so on the x-axis, to bring it closer to the middle. Now let's move it from the side view. I'm selecting these two vertices and I'm gonna bring them a little bit forward, and I will do the same with the two below. We are now gonna add another loop which is going to help us create the nose area, and again I'm selecting the two vertices on the left side and bring them to the right to match the reference. Now we're going to select the loop just before, and we're going to move it up on the z-axis. Here I select these vertices and I move them a bit so we keep our head nice and round. And we're going to select the same vertices but from the other side, but this time we're going to push it on the inside of the head because this will help us to create the eyes and nose. To help you align the vertex, you can press S then X to align it on the x-axis. Then I'm moving it to the right so we can add another loop right next to it on the left. Now, a thing that I like to do when I use a drawing reference is also to use the little drawing tool to help me, especially with things like eyes, mouth or nose. Here we will use it for the eyes. So I grab the notes annotation pencil and I'm gonna draw some lines to help me know where I should place my eyes. I'm gonna do the same thing on the side, and this doesn't have to be perfect, it's just to help us getting the eye on the right place. Now we can turn off the toggle X-ray view and rearrange the vertices on the front to make them go into a circle. Same on the side, I'm just moving the vertices to match the drawing we just made. Now that we have done it roughly, we can select the point inside and delete it by pressing X and delete vertices. Here I also take time to adjust the vertices on the right side just to make sure it's still matching the reference. Now it's time to add the ears. I'm clicking on this little button and now we're going to select all of these 6 faces, then press E to extrude them and bring them upward. We are also going to size it down with S, and from the side I also bring it a bit on the back. We are also going to select these 2 vertices with the proportional editing tool turned on and bring them a bit to the back to make like a smooth transition between the ears and the head. Back to the front, I select these vertices on the left and I move them right there. And we're going to do the same on the right. Now let's add a loop in the middle and move the vertices to make the ear a little bit more rounder on the side. I'm selecting back the face selection tool and we're going to select the face inside the ear to make the inside of the hair. And I also turn off the proportional editing tool. We're going to extrude these faces with E. And now the ears are done. Let's move back to the face from the side view. I'm moving a bit these vertices to make some space because we're going to add another loop. Here just below the eyes, let's add a new loop and then move a bit the vertices around just to rearrange them. I can't really tell you where to place them specifically because we just want to try to space them equally, just like so. There is no rush, so take time to watch your head from different points of view just to make sure we don't have any harsh edges or weird vertices that could make the face weird. Let's now make the little hair on the side of the face. For this, I'm simply gonna select these 2 faces on the side and extrude them with E, then sizing them down with S. I also move these vertices on top to make them match the reference. And for the second one, we're just going to use the same method, but before, I just rearranged the vertices, then selecting again these 2 faces and with E extrude and sizing them down with S. Congrats, we are now almost done with the head. Just take a look at what you have just made, just to check if everything feels okay. Mine looks fine, I'm happy with what we got so far, so let's move on. And before moving on to the body part, we're going to add a little bit of details to the eyes. So for this, I double click on one of the edge of the eyes. It should be the one that makes the loop of the circles. Once you have selected all of the loops, we're going to extrude with E and size it down with S. Then on the side view, we're going to extrude again, but this time we're going to extrude to the back on the y-axis. I also take time to rename my object, so let's rename the cube to head. And now we can add a sphere to make the proper eyes. So Shift A to show the add menu, and we are selecting the UV sphere. Let's move to the side view again by pressing 3 on the numpad and press SY to size it down on the y-axis. And back to the front view, I'm sizing it down again. We also need to move it a bit on the y-axis. Now I'm switching to the top view by pressing 7 on my numpad, and we're going to rotate it with R to align it with the face. I can now add a mirror modifier. Then in the mirror object box, let's click on the pipette and choose the head as the object of reference. And here I'm just going to move around to see if the eyes is fitting right and adjusting if needed. While still selecting the eyes, we're going to add a subdivision modifier and set it to 2. Then right clicking on my eyes, I'm going to choose Shade Smooth. And we're going to do the same things to the face. And what I like to do now that our head is almost finished is to rearrange the shape a bit with the sculpting tool. So we go into the sculpting mode on the top left corner, and we're going to turn back on the toggle X-ray view. I press G to select the grabbing tool, and then I press F to size up the size of my brush. You want to make it quite big, so when we move the face, you don't make any weird look and it will move everything smoothly. Here I just moved the eyes hole to make the eyes bigger and to match my reference. Because the bigger the eyes of a character is, the cuter it looks. I'm also moving a bit the rest of the face just to make the head chubbier and rounder. So I grab a little bit on the side, the back, and also where the cheek should be right there. Again, I really take my time to match the reference while still looking if everything looks fine. Here, as you can see on the side view, the shape of the nose is smaller than it should be, but if I try to change it with the sculpting tool, it won't look very good. So I switch back to the edit mode, and then we are going to grab the vertices and move them alone. I'm also adjusting the vertices on the top and the bottom, just like so. Again, let's take time to rename the sphere as the eyes. Now let's add another cube to make the nose. So again, Shift A to show the add menu, and we choose cube. We're gonna size it down a bit by pressing S. On the side view, I grab it with G and I move it to the front of the face. I'm adding a subdivision modifier and I set it to 2. And on the side view, I'm also going to size it down on the y-axis with S and Y. Back on the front view, by pressing 1 on the numpad, I'm switching to edit mode and I'm gonna select the bottom vertices and I'm sizing them down on the x-axis. And for the top vertices, we're going to size them up. Final touches, we're going to add the eyebrows. So before it, I'm just renaming the nose. Then for the eyebrows, we are again gonna use a cube by pressing Shift A and choose cube. We are sizing it down and moving it to the right. And on the side view, I also bring it to the front of the face. I turn on the toggle X-ray view to see exactly where I should place it, and we're also gonna add a subdivision modifier and a mirror modifier. Same way we did with the eyes, we're going to choose the head as a reference with the pipette. Now on the top view, I rotate it to follow the shape of the head, and I can now select each of my objects and right click on them and choose Shade Smooth. And here is the result of the head. Let's now move on to the body. To keep my collection organized, I'm adding a new collection where all of the objects of the body and the clothes will be. Now I have a collection for the head and one for the body. To make our body, let's start off with a cube, just like we did with the head. Shift A, add a cube, and we're gonna add a subdivision modifier, set it to 2 and apply it. Now we can turn on the toggle X-ray view and press Tab to go into the edit mode. We select all of the vertices on the left side and press X to delete the vertices. Now let's just add a mirror modifier and don't forget to check the clipping box. Back into edit mode with Tab, I'm gonna select these vertices and we're gonna rotate them a bit. For the vertices on the top, I bring the one on the right a bit more upward and I'm moving my mesh just to have a nice shape that follow my reference. For the legs, I'm selecting these vertices and I'm pressing X to delete, and by double clicking on the edge we are selecting the entire loop. Let's press N to show the tab on the right side of your 3D viewport, and we're gonna go into the edit part and then click on loop tool, and inside we're going to click on circle. Back to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, we're going to rotate these circles and try to align it on the x-axis. Now we can press E to extrude and Z to move in onto the z-axis. I'm sizing it down just a little bit so I have smaller legs. Let's move to the side view with 3, and we're gonna move the vertices to match the reference on the left and the right to make the body slimmer. For the arms, we are using the same technique. Select this vertex, X to delete, then double click on it and then N to show the right tab and choose a circle in the loop tool section. Before extruding it, I'm gonna add a subdivision modifier and set it to 2. Now I can extrude the arm, which will be in fact the sleeve of the sweater. I'm extruding it a few times with E, and at the same time I'm rotating the circle each time to follow the reference with R. Before moving on, let's just adjust the top of the sweater, mostly on the front and the back. For this I use the proportional editing tool to help me move them more smoothly. Back to the sleeve, I'm selecting this loop one more time and I'm gonna extrude again, but this time I'm sizing it up directly after hitting E to mimic the sleeve being rolled up. Then I extrude again, but this time I press E, then Z to move it on the Z axis. And then I extrude one more time with E, then S to size it down these last vertices. And here I just add a loop to redefine the sleeve. Let's now create the overalls. To make it simpler, we're gonna click on the body part we have just made earlier, and in edit mode we're going to select all of the faces except the sleeves. Then to duplicate we are pressing Shift D, then we click on P to separate the two mesh. So back to the clothes, in edit mode we're going to delete the top vertices, and since this overall is supposed to be on top of the body and the sweater, we are sizing it up just a little bit with S. Back in edit mode we select the top vertices and press S then Z to align them with each other. Now to connect the two parts, I go turn on the toggle X-ray view and I select these vertices, and in side view we're gonna extrude them upwards once, then twice, and then we can press F to link them with a face. And I'm adding a loop on the top of the face we have just added. Here I'm just gonna move the face until they rest on the shoulder of the character. I just rotate and tweak them until I'm happy with the result. Now let's bring the bottom of the overall back up so it can be a short. And I'm also going to select all of these vertices and scale up with S. And same thing as we did for the head, we're gonna use the grabbing tool on this sculpting mode and just move the bottom of the short to make it a little bit bigger. Now let's delete this face with X, delete faces. And we're gonna extrude it back, but this time we are going to extrude it on the Y-axis, then on the Z-axis. Let's give a bit of shape to this overall by moving the edge on the middle to the Z-axis, this one on the side downwards. Now to add the little metallic details, I'm gonna press Shift A to show the add menu, and then into the curve section we are going to select path. You can now size it down with S, and on the right, on the section Object Data Properties, we open the geometry section and we add depth. Let's put it at something like 0.07. Let's switch to edit mode and delete the left side and add a mirror modifier. And now I started to move the curve, but I thought that it would look better if it was bigger, so I increased the depth a bit. We can now extrude a few times to get the desired shapes. And once you got this kind of shape, you can move it and rotate it to place it at the end of the straps. If, like me, the space on the strap is too thin, just go back into edit mode and move the vertex away. And of course we're gonna add mirror modifier. Now to create the buttons, we're going to add a cylinder, so press Shift A, then click on cylinder. Press 3 to go onto the side view, then R90 to rotate our shape. We can now size it down since it's way too big. I'm also bringing it on the front of my character, and back into the edit mode with Tab, and still on the side view, let's select the vertices, press E to extrude and S to scale it up. Then E to extrude it again, but this time on the Y-axis. And we're going to extrude one more time and immediately size it down, and one more time extruding it on the Y-axis on the back, so inside of the shape. Make the shape smoother without losing too much of the shape. We're just gonna add a bevel modifier first, so I'm increasing the segment section, then right click, shade smooth. And to add extra smoothness, you can add a subdivision modifier and set it to 1 or 2. We can now place it inside the shape we did just before, and I'm gonna move it and rotate it. Let's move on to the shoes. Just before, we are going to add socks. For this, it's very easy. We are going to duplicate our legs right here. So we click on the legs, and then with the toggle X-ray view on, we go into edit mode with Tab. And I'm gonna select all of the faces, and I can press Shift D and right click to apply the duplication. And while I'm still selecting these duplicate faces, we're going to press P to separate the two mesh and choose by selection. Then I right click on my shape and I'm gonna set the origin to geometry, and in the mirror modifier I'm going to use the pipette and set the overall as the mirror object. And we can size it up a bit to make it go on top of the leg, and size it down just a little bit on the Z axis to make it less tall. Let's rename it so we keep our collection nice and tidy. To rename your object, you can also use the shortcut F2 and directly type the name you want it to be. Now for the shoe, we're gonna start off with a cube. I'm gonna add a subdivision modifier first and set it to 2. Then before adding a mirror modifier, I'm adding a loop to the middle and I'm deleting the left side. Now we can add the mirror modifier, and don't forget to place the mirror modifier on top of this subdivision one. This is really important. Now let's delete the top face. I'm selecting the vertices on the top and I'm pressing X to delete faces. Let's grab again the vertices on the top and bring them down on the Z-axis. Let's bring the mesh down to a place where the shoes should be. I'm going to size it down a bit on the X-axis to make it less wide, and same thing on this side view. Let's add a loop and slide it to the bottom. Now select the top vertex again, and we're gonna extrude 2 times for now. So 1 and 2. Then we can move this vertex to make the shape of the shoes. Let's extrude the top vertices again 2 times. So 1 and 2. And back to the front view, I noticed that I forgot to check the clipping box, so let's check it and bring the vertices to the left to merge them. Now let's go into the top view with 7, and I'm gonna move a bit these vertices to make the shoes a bit rounder. And I'm gonna scale up the whole shape. To add a little bit more details, I'm gonna bevel a loop to make a difference between the shoes and the sole. So let's select this loop, then press Ctrl B. And to add more or less loop, you have to use your mouse wheel. Here I just want to add one. Now I'm gonna click on the edge selection and double click on the new loop in the middle, the one that we have just added. And I'm sizing it down with S. Now to create the shoe tongue, we're gonna select the 2 front face and duplicate them with Shift D, then P to separate them. Now on the shoes, we have to make some space for the shoe tongues, so let's select the 2 front vertex. But before, let's turn off the clipping box for now, then move the 2 vertex to the right. Back to the shoe tongue, we're gonna resize it and move it so it goes behind the shoes. I'm also gonna add a loop so we can make it a little bit bigger. I'm adding another loop right here, and I'm just going to curve a bit the top vertex by rotating them with R. Now we can add another mirror modifier to the 2 mesh, so it's mirroring to the other side. To make the shoelace, we're gonna use a curve. So let's just duplicate the one that we used earlier, the little details on the overalls, with Shift D. And then remove the first mirror modifier. We can now rotate it on the front and the side view. I'm also gonna delete these 3 vertex, and now we can rearrange the curves to make the shoelace. From now on, I'm just going to duplicate with Shift D to make the rest of the shoelace. I layer them, so I place one from the left to the right, duplicate it, and the new one will go on top of the other one. And I'm just going to do this again and again. Last details for the shoelace, I'm duplicating again one of the curves, and I will make like a little bow. And just like that, I'm placing it on top and duplicating it to make a second one. We are almost done. Let's now add the hand, and for this we're gonna use a single word. So Shift A to show the add menu and add single word. If you don't see it right now, it's okay, we're gonna add a skin modifier and also a subdivision modifier that I set to true. Now you should be able to see it. So just move it to where the hand should be. Turn on the toggle X-ray view, and we're gonna extrude the vertex on the Z axis. This will be the wrist part. And from the top vertex, we're gonna extrude 4 times, just like so. From this new vertex, we're also gonna extrude again 2 times to make the fingers. If you have a weird look like me, it's okay, we just have to tweak a little bit the vertex, and with Ctrl A we can increase or decrease the size of the vertex. So here I'm just gonna move the vertex until I'm happy with the result. I'm sizing up the palm of the hand with Ctrl A, and I make the tip of the finger a bit smaller still with Ctrl A. Now we can rotate it with R, then scale it down with S, and place it inside the sleeves. And check the smooth shading box in the skin modifier to make it smoother. I also increase the subdivision, but you can let it at 2 if you want. Now we can add a mirror modifier to make the left hand, and I choose the head as the mirror object. Before going any further, I just take a look at everything, and in my opinion, parts of the character needed to be just a little bit more round, like the sleeve for example. So I went into the sculpting mode and I take the grab tool like we did for the face, and by pressing G I just pull the side of the sweater. Here let's just add a little bit of detail to the shoulder, just like we did with the sole of the shoes. I'm adding a loop right here, and we're gonna bevel it with Ctrl B, still with one loop in the middle, and then selecting this very loop and sizing it down. For the sweater, I wanted to add a collar, so I went into edit mode and then I select the faces that would go around the neck if our character had one. Let's now duplicate them with Shift D, then P to separate the two mesh. We're also gonna add a solidify modifier that we'll place on top of the subdivision one and add some thickness. And make sure the collar goes under the straps of the overall. And now I'm gonna move the vertices to make the collar rounder. So just take your time and adjust it nicely. Now select all of the objects we added for the body and the clothes, then right click, shade smooth. One thing I did forget earlier is the little mouth underneath the nose, so let's just duplicate the nose, and in edit mode we're gonna add a loop in the middle, and now you know what to do. We add a mirror modifier, then delete the left side. Don't forget to put the mirror modifier on top of the subdivision one, and before extruding it we're going to scale it down on the front and the side view. We're gonna extrude the shape and follow the reference. Don't forget to uncheck the clipping box so we can extrude it to the right. And once we have extruded, we can recheck the clipping box. For the eyes, a simple way to make them pop is to duplicate them and to place a smaller one just on top of the base one. Final details to add is just this little piece of hair inside the ear. We're gonna add a cube, so with Shift A and choose cube. We're gonna add a subdivision modifier. I scale down a bit the top vertices and rotate it a bit to the right. I'm also sizing it down on the Y-axis, then extruding the bottom face. This way we have an extra loop in the middle and we can curve our shape just like so. Let's find a shape that you like, then duplicate it and rotate the new shape. You can now select the two shapes and press Ctrl J to join the two mesh into one, so that now we can add a mirror modifier and the two mesh will be duplicated. We have now finished the head, body and clothes of our character. Congrats if you made it that far. The next part will be all about texturing the character, lightening the scene and render it. Thanks for following this tutorial. Don't hesitate if you have any question, I will answer it in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the part 2.